Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co., and today we're continuing our ranking of various publishers' games, and today we are doing Kids Table Board Gaming and Burnt Island Games. For those who don't know, those are sister companies, Burnt Island Games, Kids Table Board Games. They're both the same publisher, but effectively they create board games for two different audiences, a more family-focused and kids games, Kids Table Board Games, and then Burnt Island Games that tend to do medium-weight strategy games of a variety type, from worker placement to area control, that and all more, and that polyominoes, all those things and more. This is a series I've been doing with a bunch of publishers. If you want to see any other publishers added, by all means, post in the comments down below and I'll see what I can get to. In general, any publisher that I've played enough of their games that it would make for an actually interesting video, I'll go ahead and do. And if I played 4 of those publishers' games, it's not that interesting of a ranking video. Anyways, let's go ahead and dive into this. Now, when I first tried to put together this video, I was originally going to actually combine the lists of Kids Table Board Gamings and Burnt Island Games. I was going to combine them into one list, but in the end, I'm actually doing 2 separate lists for one primary reason, which is the rankings of the game actually happen to work out that every single Kids Table Board Gaming is going to be ranked lower for me than a Burnt Island Games game. So even though technically it is well, depends how you look at it. It is 2 separate lists because they just trail into the other. We're going to be going from my least favorite to my most favorite in this genre, in these games over here. And it does make sense to a degree that I'm going to like and prefer the medium weight strategy games over the family friendly games. Now, I will have notes and comments on all the games as I go through them, and I should note that they make fantastic family friendly games. Just at the end of the day, the main thing that when it comes to the strategy level of a game, I appreciate a good family weight game or kids game that I can play with my kids and enjoy. And Kids Table Board Gaming has a lot of those, but we'll get to all of those shortly. Versus at the end of the day, the thing that's going to most get my strategic juices flowing are going to be those medium weight games. So it's kind of one shared list, but also won't come across that way. I'll also say, just so you know the full amount of games I've played or not played, from everything they've put out so far, the only games I have not played are going to be Mycelia, which is a game that they actually are distributing. They're not their original game, but they've taken it under their brand. So Mycelia I have not played yet. And from Kids Table Board Games, I have not played Haunt the House or Bugs on the Run, or Bugs on Rugs, different game. Bugs on Rugs and Haunt the House I have not played, and also Lairs, their upcoming KTBG title, I have also not played. Everything else I've played, and we're going to go ahead and start this off with the lowest ranked game on this list, which is going to be Food Fighters, which I'd give a 2 out of 5. Food Fighters is fine. It's a game that I only played it after I kind of became more aware of KTBG as a brand and started playing their games and really liking them. I think I played Creature Comforts before Food Fighters, and then I kind of was like, oh my gosh, these games are so good that I want to try out all their catalog of games. And so I started trying out some of their older games and realizing that some of their older games were not as much for me, which is part of the reason why I haven't bothered diving into Haunt the House or Bugs and Rugs, because once I started going down that rabbit hole and realizing that they weren't as much the kind of games that I enjoyed, I just stopped playing the older titles. But Food Fighters is definitely going to be one of their older titles. It might even be their first title, I'm not honestly sure. But it's one that does feel like their first title to a degree, or an earlier title. I don't think the strategic element was as good there. There's definitely some rearranging of, you basically have lines of food fighting against each other. That's what you have over there. You have different food choices you can take on. It's a cute game. I can see kids enjoying it. For me, it was just chaotic, random, and not overly engaging. Next up, we have Diced Veggies, coming in at a 3 out of 5. And Diced Veggies is actually probably one of their most popular KTBG board games right now, and it's one that I'm a huge proponent for because I think it has a visual appeal, I think it has a cute aesthetic, I think it's priced well, I think it's the kind of game that will get people into board games. And I do enjoy it, but I don't love it as much as their other KTBG games. I appreciate it a lot more than the games, meaning as much as I'm going to have some titles later up that I like more, I think Food Fighters would often be one that Diced Veggies would often be one that I'd recommend to people who are new to the hobby, who want something cheap and easy to play. I think Food Fighters has that kids presence. Like, my kids love it. Like, they want the idea of just grabbing a little knife and chopping up little dice and setting them to the side is very, very appealing. And so Diced Veggies has that mass market appeal, the gateway price point, and ultimately it's a game of where you chop up veggies in order to grab those veggies, which are dice, and use those pips towards various ingredients so you can craft recipes and ingredients. So it basically is like, set collection-ish where the sets are the dice, and you're trying to fulfill recipes. So contract fulfillment and set collection in a cute game with a cute little theme. And my main issue with it was it kind of felt like the dice cutting wasn't as satisfying as I would like. The numbers on the dice often weren't as meaningful as I would like, so you have a limited number of pips you can gather, but often those pips don't actually matter for the thing you're trying to fulfill. So overall, the core puzzle of it, I would love to see a Diced Veggies concept that was taken and, iterated a bit more to something more strategic. As it is, I appreciate it a lot, but it's not one for me quite as much. It's a 3 out of 5. From there we have Maki Master, which was previously known as Wasabi, coming in at a 3 out of 5 again. This is also a game where you're trying to gather, it's contract fulfillment, you're trying to gather, again, various ingredients from a Maki board and trying to use those to prepare various recipes while using powers and abilities. It's an older title they actually brought back recently. The original game was called Wasabi under Z-Man Games. They brought it back and they renamed it Maki Master, and they're using that as a they brought it back as Maki Master, and it is a little lighter than the kind of game I personally want. I think it falls nicely under the KTBG line. Ultimately, where Dice Veggies is gathering ingredients and fulfilling recipes, Wasabi, now known as Maki Master, is a more advanced version of that, but still a little on the lighter side for me, not as fulfilling as I'd like. Coming in at Cafe Baras, we have a 3.5 out of 5. Cafe Baras is another small box game in their Dice Veggies line, I guess. I don't know if they have official lines there, but in terms of box size or cost, price point, Cafe Baras is about running a cafe, where you're gathering various things that will help you serve your various customers. So again, you're noticing a theme here between, Food Fighters is more just fighting each other, but Dice Veggies, Maki Master, and Cafe Baras, all about gathering various things to fulfill various obligations, so very nice little food themes going on there. I enjoyed the tableau building element of Cafe Baras. It's definitely a little bit more going on. I like tableau building, I like building up my cafe, making it so I can fulfill more and more orders, so it does speed up and it has a nice arc to the game. Because of that, I definitely liked it more. Came in at a 3.5 out of 5. From there we have Fossilis. Fossilis is an interesting one because the gameplay is arguably a little less what I'm looking for, but the pure table presence and visual appeal and the aesthetic of the game and all that bumped it up for me easily. So this is another 3.5 out of 5. Fossilis has you gathering fossils to basically construct dinosaurs. So you have this little tray over here where you're trying to uncover various spots of sand and dirt and all that, so you can eventually take your little tweezers, reach in, and grab the various dinosaur bones you need to go ahead and rebuild that little T-Rex head or that Triceratops or whatever it is you need. So you're gathering various bones to create these dinosaurs. It has some degree of powers and abilities. It has a great element of the tableaus, the shifting of the upper layer of the board, of the various, again, sand, dirt, earth, and all that, as you try to get to things. Overall, great table presence, pretty decent gameplay. The combined aspect of them comes in at a 3.5 out of 5. Next up, we have Power Plants. Power Plants I gave another 3.5 out of 5. Well, this is definitely one that I always went back and forth on. I still go back and forth on. The production of Power Plants is top-notch. So the general idea of the game is an area control game that is a little on the lighter side. It's all about the chaos of it. You gather various abilities. You try to go ahead and put down different tiles and use the ability on that tile to figure out how you're going to move your sprites onto the board in different ways. It has a lot of strategy going on. This one's actually a little in terms of the most accessible versus least accessible KTBG titles. I do think Power Plants is their least accessible KTBG title, and I think possibly it's one of those interesting ones where if they had gone a different way with it, I could see it actually working well in the Burnt Island Games line with a little more development and making it a bit more adult friendly. But I think Power Plants is a lot of fun as far as the abilities that you have going on in the game, the way you're trying to get the sprites into the board, the way you're trying to remove opponent sprites, all while you play in this area control cutthroat game of just trying to get the most dominance in the game. Overall, I thought Power Plants is a very fun game. My biggest issue with it is that there's a little bit too much chaos. So it falls into this reign where I play it when I want to have a good time, but it's not one that I play when I'm like, ooh, my control over the board will be dominant. It won't be. I'll be able to do as good as I can, and ultimately, if you're playing at a higher player count, you'll just be you're a victim to the chaos of what happens, and if you're playing as a two-player game, there's a bit more control, but I don't know if I'd want to play it as much as a two-player game. I don't know if it's that kind of vibe. It's a more fun party vibe with a dash of area control and powers and abilities mixed in. From there, we have Creature Comforts coming in at a 4 out of 5. Creature Comforts is a worker placement game where you're going to be placing your workers in different zones in the board in order to gather various things, basically to build your creature comforts. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to gather various things that will help your tableau, various components that will work towards your creature comforts, the specific spots on the board where you can go to trade and take different actions. It is a worker placement game with a fun degree of charm. It's a dice placement game with a fun degree of charm, trying to figure out the right way to place your dice in various zones in the board to get what you need. Ultimately, it's very charming. It's got a good worker placement game going on. It has a degree of tableau building going on because there's some powers and abilities you can get, some various tools and gears along the side, and ultimately it's a very satisfying, very friendly, very kid-friendly worker placement game. I think this is a great worker placement game to introduce kids to the concept of worker placement. Coming in straight on the heels from there, we have Maple Valley, which I think arguably did it a little bit better, and it's hard to say for sure. I do go back and forth on these two. These two are very much neck and neck. Maple Valley is in the same thematic universe as Creature Comforts, and it's going to have the same kind of idea, but instead of worker placement, it's worker movement. You're kind of moving your workers along different pathways, paying to move them further if you need need to in order to cash in, again, that degree of set collection with that same degree of charm, same degree of trying to figure out the unique locations every game's going to have, the way you can gather the stuff to be able to get those comforts in. And so overall, Maple Valley is kind of a same vein as Creature Comforts. It's one of those games that if you like one, you'll almost certainly like the other. They definitely fall into the same general universe. There's these friends you can get in Maple Valley that are a lot of fun to go ahead and, again, to increase and build your tableau out. Both of them are excellent, friendly yet strategic worker placement or worker movement games. And then lastly, in the KTBG line, my personal favorite is Rec Raiders, which I don't think is their most popular. It's just the one that I tend to enjoy the most. Rec Raiders has a dice placement, dice bumping kind of as you go through the game, trying to build up anything from your little aquariums of different fish you're going to be gathering, or trying to gathering various ingredients in order to be, not ingredients, cells or components in order to either put them into your vault or alternatively trade them in for these like little podiums or mantles you're trading in for. There's a lot of just getting stuff and then figuring out the best way to get those stuff while dealing with a degree of dice placement, dice bumping in the game. I find for whatever reason that one I just find is so much fun to go through. My kids have a lot of fun with it. It is fairly fast-paced, doesn't outstay its welcome, and it's just a very, very good game. Rec Raiders is probably their oldest title that I really, really enjoy and appreciate, coming in at another 4 out of 5. And from there, we're going to transition to the Burnt Island Games line. And from there, I think I played every single thing that Burnt Island Games has put out. I believe they started with Endeavor Age of Sail, if I'm not mistaken. But we're going to start with Into Deep, which I have as a 4 out of 5. Into Deep was a very satisfying puzzle of trying to figure out how to set up the board using all the options at your disposal, the abilities, your actions for the turn, trying to figure out how to set up the board in order to accomplish, well, your specific goals. So you have these kind of cards that give you certain things you're trying to trigger based on everything happening on the board, and you're trying to get that to happen. The problem is other players are messing with that shared landscape, that shared ecosystem, and you're trying to figure out how you can get what you need in the one turn before they mess things back up because they don't know what you're going for, but they're all just doing their own thing in the game. And it's a game that basically rewards you for setting up these combos and trying to find the right opportunity to cash in extra actions or extra options in the game, all while you take control. You're basically like, you're mentally riding into these various characters in the game and controlling them. It was a very satisfying puzzle experience that I think was held back a bit by just a bit too many things put into the game. It's a really, really solid game. It's one of those games I'm always happy to play, but it was a harder one to table to get people up and running. It's actually, I would argue that Into Deep is actually higher up in terms of how much I like it from their games, but the accessibility of it and getting new people to table, it just proved to be a harder experience than I was looking for in terms of there's so many different things going on in the game because you're trying to control the shared board. There's a whole point scoring element as well of how you're trying to score. There's a hidden element as far as not taking too many cards, not going in too deep. There was just a few too many mechanics in the game. It all worked together beautifully in the end, but you had to get to that end point, but it's a 4 out of 5 for me. Next we have Endeavor Age of Sail, which is another 4 out of 5 for me. Endeavor Age of Sail, there's the original game before Burnt Island Games took it over. I never played the original, but I did play Endeavor Age of Sail. I played the basic version of the game, which I thought was excellent. It's all about just placing things down to try to get these various combinations of just anything on the track. It's basically just everything's going to give you stuff, and you're trying to figure out the right combination of stuff that's going to give you things, whether you're going for the governors, whether you're just trying to find those little bonuses in between zones. There's a ton of things going on. It's a fast-paced placement game. Not really worker placement, but kind of has that vibe to it as you just try to slowly populate the entire board to help you. I like the base game a lot. The only issue I have with it is as you introduce these various kind of scenario type situations in the game, I always felt those were kind of messy. They add this element to the new version that they brought out, which gives you more variability, but they all felt a little clunky and they didn't smoothly integrate to the game, at least for me, and that held back a little bit from how good the experience can be. Then we have In the Hall of the Mountain King, which I also gave a 4 out of 5. In the Hall of the Mountain King is a polyomino game with a fascinating resource collection element going on. The general idea is you're placing these polyominoes onto this hall, this underground caverns, so you can slowly make your way further and further into the caverns to be able to build these caverns in the underground area. Think of it as like, Lord of the Rings thematically, but you're like in the mines of Moria and you're building out all these things. The polyomino pieces were very satisfying. The trying to get all the various underground goodies are satisfying. The building out your caverns are satisfying. All the different ways you score points were satisfying, but also the troll cards that would have you this cascading area of resources, because you gather these cards that would go up and up in a pyramid, causing you to cascade more and more resources, which is a fascinating little puzzle to go through as well. That was very rewarding to just have a ton of things slowly collected. Overall, very solid game. My biggest issue with it was as a polyomino game, it didn't really feel it had the same polyomino coverage vibes you typically get from a polyomino game. There are times where you are trying to build a polyomino section to build a cavern, but outside of that, it didn't feel like you were trying to cover areas the way you normally would. It's just about driving your way to the middle. So it's a polyomino game that didn't fully feel like a polyomino game. That held it back a bit for me, but overall, in the Hall of the Mountain King, fantastic game. From there we have Fall of the Mountain King, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5. Fall of the Mountain King is an area control game in which you're dealing with 3 rounds of the, I think it's I can't remember if it's goblins or gnolls, whatever they are, but they're trying to invade the caverns. And you're trying to control these trolls, but you're also trying to fight with other players, but also be mindful of the invasions. Because you're kind of fighting with other players for control of the caverns, but you're mindful of what's actually going to invade the caverns. You're trying to be there because you do want points, but you don't want to be overwhelmed. There's a fascinating little balance going on there. And then like in the Hall of the Mountain King, there's an entirely separate resource collection game going on, where you're placing with these overlay cards, and I love overlay cards. I love cards where you're overlaying them, trying to find the right combination of, if I put this over these cards like this, I'll be able to trigger these bonuses, because you're trying to create these groupings of icons to be able to take stronger and stronger actions in the game. Combine that with these trolls, the troll leaders you're going to get, they're all going to give you different abilities, and that's another satisfying kind of area control element going on in the game. There were a lot of fun things happening in Fall of the Mountain King, like in Too Deep, possibly a few too many things, making it a little bit messy at times, but ultimately the experience gives you an excellent area control game that I've really enjoyed. Coming in next up, we have How to Save a World, the newest title that's not actually out yet. I think everything else we've talked about is out, I think. But How to Save a World is their newest title, and it's a worker placement game that gives you a degree of area control-ish kind of. I don't know if it's area control so much as voting, I don't know what you want to call it, but the basic idea is you're trying to determine how to save the world. Do you blow up this meteor kind of heading toward the planet? Do you create a planetary shield, or do you evacuate the planet? And the reason this matters is because whichever opportunity works, the people who invested more in that opportunity are going to get rewarded for that. So there is a degree of trying to figure out which way the tide is turning in the game and investing your efforts appropriately. Meanwhile, you're playing with a worker placement game where you're placing workers down, but often they shuttle from system to system in the game. So when you place a worker somewhere, you're also controlling where that worker is available next turn, but meanwhile you're also building up your tableau every single turn. The game is and it's a variable end as well. It's a variable end in terms of when the game will actually end, because you're pulling these tokens from a bag, so you don't know exactly when the game will end, which means you can't math it out perfectly. The overall puzzle was very satisfying, lots of tableau building, tons of card play that was very, very rewarding, and overall just a fast-paced, quick-moving game that gave you a lot to actually do or think about in the game, with a very easy teach, very easy play, and accessible game with a lot of strategic depth to it. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. And then lastly, we have Endeavor Deep Sea, which I also gave a 4.5 out of 5. I think that one's delivering-ish now. Like, that one's like basically, I don't know if it's out yet officially. I don't think it's out yet, but it's on its way basically coming out. But Endeavor Deep Sea is the newer version of Endeavor Age of Sail, and I think they did a great job of taking the core concepts of Endeavor Age of Sail and putting it into a better game system. Now, I do prefer the theme of Endeavor Deep Sea, Endeavor Age of Sail. Endeavor Deep Sea is a little more clinical, a little more biological as you move your sub lower and lower, but the end result is a game that's going to give you the same core concept of building out your buildings, of trying to take certain actions, of powering up your crew to reward those actions, of figuring out which ways to grow your crew and which ways to grow your actions so you can become stronger in whatever you're trying to do, which is a constant puzzle of getting various tokens back, getting more tokens in the game, having more actions every single round. You're trying to figure out the right puzzle and combination of everything that will get you the most points in Endeavor Deep Sea. I think it built beautifully off of Endeavor Age of Sail, and I'm looking forward to playing the end game, because the last thing I played was a prototype, which is good, but I want to play the final version of it. But that's likely my highest one, coming in at a 4.5. That likely is just a small asterisk of sometimes you play a final game and things can change from the prototype. I'm optimistic that any changes will be in a good direction. That is my ranking of Burnt Island games and KTBG. Again, I originally approached this list trying to just mix and match them together. I figured same parent publisher, why not use them together? The end result is that my highest rated KTBG game, Wreck Raiders, is still going to be something that I'd rather play into deep above that. It's just the nature of what I'm personally vibing versus the family-friendly / kid-friendly experience that KTBG offers you as well. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as I said at the beginning, if there are any other publishers you'd like to see me take and rank, just let me know in the comments down below. As always, I hope you have a good one.